everyone, and welcome into the Horse Racing Show. This episode number 12 already. I'm Kenny Rice, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for tuning in at 93.9 The Ville in Louisville, Kentucky. And thank you for tuning in on YouTube or whatever format you're listening to this week. Now, don't you like surprises in sports? The unexpected, it's why we like sports. It's why we follow sports. Horse racing is full of surprises. So is college basketball, the season just ending. Now, it wasn't necessarily a surprise that Virginia wins it all, but it was a surprise that the team they beat was even in the finals. And that is what we're going to talk about to get this show started. Later on, Mike Battaglia will join us. He is the man that will set the morning line for the Kentucky Derby. Who does he think is the favorite or favorites right now, given it's still a wide open field? And then Matt Bernier from the Daily Racing Forum has his own show on DRF TV, and we've worked together at NBC. Great handicapper. He'll talk about his experience in handicapping tournaments because he's won several of them and for big money. With us, as always, Mr. Thomas Kenny, our researcher. Thomas, we were talking now about the surprises in sports, and as you pointed out, we were looking at the leaderboard on January 1st for the Kentucky Derby, and now the up-to-date leaderboard. And as best I see, we've got about 5 horses in the top 21 still around from that first one that came out in January.
Yeah, the point spread is a lot bigger than it was the 1st of January, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, I think that shows the unpredictability of horse racing. People get excited, and naturally so, when a horse does really well in February. But to me, it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. When you get down to the round of 16, we just had 3 big races last weekend. Suddenly, Roadster. Hey, where's Roadster, Thomas, on January 1st? Oh, he's not there, is he?
No, not at all.
Not there. There was a horse named Mucho Gusto, another Bob Baffert horse who was there, who's no longer there after a poor performance in Sunland Derby, but now Roadster is shooting up the charts. How about that for a turnaround?
You just never know what's going to happen with these horses, especially.
And especially this year. I think this is the year of the Texas Tech maybe out there. Some might consider already Maximum Security or by my standards a Texas Tech kind of horse. Because, Thomas, you have pulled up also the preseason AP basketball poll when this all started this season.
Yeah, I've got it sitting in front of me here, and let me tell you, Kenny, Texas Tech is nowhere to be found.
What? The Red Raiders are not in the top 25? I don't even think, I'm looking at 2 sheets, they're nowhere. Well, so much for the experts. So much for the experts. Although I will say, well, no, go down the list. Let's see. Let's go down the list, and we'll see the top 10, Thomas. What we
Coming
got?
in at number 1 for the preseason poll was Kansas.
Yeah, no, not a good year for Bill Self and the Jayhawks.
Not at all.
Who was number 2?
Number 2 would be the hometown Kentucky Wildcats, at least for those of us here in studio.
That would be an Elite 8 team, but not the Final Four team.
Coming in at number 3 is Gonzaga.
Okay, they were an Elite 8 team, I believe, but not a Final Four. So that's pretty good. They're hitting them pretty good.
Number 4 would be Duke.
They were supposed to win it all, I thought, but they were listed number 4 in the preseason, but they Elite 8. But number 5's an interesting pick.
Number 5 would be Virginia.
How about that? So, I give a lot of credit there, and that's pretty good picking. 1 out of 5 wins it. I don't know if you could have picked that on the leaderboard of the Kentucky Derby, do you?
I feel like that'd be a little bit harder.
Maybe Game Winner, because Game Winner was in the top 5, and Game Winner is still hanging up there after a couple of second-place finishes. But some of them, and, it's no knock. I mean, these people do this for a living. There's sports writers, sportscasters that follow basketball. But, like, Nevada was picked up there. West Virginia was picked up there. Mississippi State. UCLA was a top 21 team. Wow. Some they missed poorly, didn't they?
Just a little bit.
Some they missed poorly on. Others, overall, did pretty good. They actually had Michigan State at number 10. That was a good pick, Final Four. And they had Auburn at number 11. People forget Auburn was really not a Cinderella team. In the preseason poll, they were supposed to be good. They were ranked in the top 10 several times in the season.
Yeah.
And then they got the second win when they needed it. Down the stretch. SEC tournament all the way through. Almost all the way through. Horse racing is kind of the same thing, isn't it? Kind of look at that horse that's doing pretty well right now. Roadster has jumped up into the pool, the leader in the pool of the Kentucky Derby after winning the Santa Anita Derby. We like winners, don't we, Thomas?
We do.
We like winners. Those horses that run, second, third, we'll forget about them. But if you keep winning, we like that. We're going to talk with guys who know a lot about it, and they will hopefully sort it out and give us a little better feeling. Boy, West Virginia did have a bad season, didn't they? I like
really
Bob
did.
Huggins. Yeah, I thought they would do better. They were picked 13th. Wow. Of course, there's several horses on here that I would have said, I guarantee 2 or 3 of them will still be in the top 20. Nah.
Just falling off the face of the earth.
They're gone. I don't even know where they are. I guess we could track them down if we had the time. You want to do that? Nah, you don't have that time. Scott Hall is back from vacation with the tan. He's back in there on lead guitar.
Hello, Kenny.
And on keyboard and bass again this week, Ben Chaffins, who doesn't have a tan because they won't let him out of the studio.
That's right.
Is that personal, Thomas? Why do we never let Ben out of the studio?
No comment.
Well, we've broken the story here. All right, this is the Horse Racing Show. Mike Battaglia is going to tell us, we hope, who he thinks is going to win the Derby. And Matt Bernier from the Daily Racing Forum will join us a little later on as well with his take on how you should play your horse racing tournaments. A lot of money at stake if you're really good at it like he is. All that coming up on this edition, number 12 of the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad you're tuning in on YouTube. Thank you for liking and subscribing, as well as on Facebook. Follow us at Horse Racing Show on Twitter, and of course at iTunes and Google Play. And I'm glad to have with us on this show one of my great friends. We've known each other for decades. He was wonderful to me when I first started covering this sport. And you know him, you love him. He's an announcer. He's called races. He's been a reporter for NBC, and he is the odds maker for, among other things, this race coming up at Churchill Downs called the Kentucky Derby. Mike Battaglia joins us. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Kenny, you make me sound old. Oh, never mind, I am old.
Oh, never mind then. Mike and I have known each other for about 2 or 3 days. But the Derby, I know everybody's already asking you, who's going to win? Who are you going to make as the favorite? I mean, they probably started asking you that 2 or 3 weeks ago.
You know what? It's the same every year, and people, they get Derby fever, and people want to know, and they pick their horses early. It's just so tough to do. It's hard enough to pick the winner when you're there at the track, when you see where they're, you see them on the track, you know the post position, and people are trying to pick, and they got a bet after the Breeders' Cup in November to pick the Derby. I mean, it's one, and people go nuts for it. It's amazing to me. Amazing to me.
This year is probably not going to be one of your easiest years to pick the morning line either, I would imagine, unless, like, say, Improbable just blows the field away this weekend in the Arkansas Derby. I don't know.
Yeah, well, Game Winner has been the favorite ever since he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And on every poll, every pool, he's been the favorite, but he comes out and he loses 2 in a row. But the thing of it is, he doesn't lose badly. He loses while running good races. And so, does he stay the favorite? He didn't in Pool 4 for in the Kentucky Derby Pool 4 that Churchill puts out. But, will he, come back and be the favorite? I think it probably all is going to come down to works.
Yeah.
But between him and Roadster. And maybe even Maximum Security. That horse could be a freak. And I know he ran for a tag, but the way he ran in the Florida Derby, you just don't see horses run like that when they first time at 1.1 1/8, and just to run a race like he ran. I think it was pretty impressive. And people say, "Oh, he got an easy lead. He got an easy lead." Well, he actually won a couple starts back without the lead. I've seen horses like this before, and they just all of a sudden they freak, and we'll just have to watch him with the way he trains.
How much do you?
I think it's one of those 3 right now, or like you just mentioned, Improbable, because if he were to blow him out in the Arkansas Derby, then he could go favorite because. I mean, he's won 3 out of 4. He got beat in neck in his comeback, same as Game Winner did, same day. So, they split the Rebel. It looked like a carbon copy. They finished with the same times and both of the splits of the race. So if he comes back and he showed dramatic improvement. He could jump up there. You're right, and be the favorite.
You know, we were talking at the start of this show, looking at the college basketball preseason poll, which was pretty impressive. 3 of the top 11 teams did make it to the Final Four, but there was no mention.
Oh, yeah?
No mention of Texas Tech, but they did have Virginia in there at number 5. They had Michigan State at 10 and Auburn at 11. That's in the preseason poll. Of course,
Right.
they missed on some, like West Virginia was in the top 13 and Syracuse was in the top 16. Teams that didn't obviously pan out to have the seasons they thought. But it was funny looking at the first leaderboard of the Kentucky Derby in January 1. I think there's like 5 horses that are still even in the top 21 of the 16 have gone by the wayside. So I guess leading up to all that, Mike, when do you get excited or really start paying attention? I know you pay attention the whole time, but when do you really start getting excited about, I got to, what Derby horses out there should I really start looking at?
Saturday, those 3 races, those were huge.
Yeah.
And I thought I was impressed with all 3 winners. That's where you're going to find the favorites with the Arkansas Derby, those 3 races, and there's preps and there's preps and there's preps. And then you come down to the tough one, the Florida Derby too. You got to throw that in, but you get your favorite out of those races. The Florida Derby, the Arkansas Derby, the Bluegrass, the Wood, the Santa Anita Derby. Those are your big races.
Yeah.
So, when you watch, when you see what happened, you start throwing out the 2-year-old form. You just don't look at it. You don't go back and look at what they did. As I don't, because that 2-year-old doesn't matter. What matters is how the horse has progressed. And I say it all the time. These 3-year-olds improve so drastically in a few months. They just keep getting better. Some of them, and the one you got to get the one that is at his peak. Go back and just take a look at the Charismatic when he won the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
He was running for a tag for Wayne Lucas, and Wayne brought him in and let's run him into Lexington, and he airs in Lexington, winds up airing in the Derby. That was a horse that just improved so much in 2 months. And it just happens with these 3-year-olds. They can do that, and you just have to kind of wait until you got to wait until the end and see.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's nice to say that horse looks pretty good, but I laugh, and I know you get it a lot more than I'll ever will when they say, "Hey, Mike, I saw that horse that just won the Lecomte." Or I'm not picking on a race, but pick a race. In February they go, "Wow, he looks like the Derby horse." And I always say, you know what? This is like a good win late in the season. Until you get into the postseason tournament, I don't get too excited until we start narrowing it down to the final 32 and then the 16.
Exactly. And that's when this is crunch time. And also you got to look at trainers. Baffert, he is just so daggone good. You don't win that many derbies and triple crowns by luck. This guy knows what the heck he's doing. So you gotta look at his horses. And when he's sitting there with 3 of them, think about that. 3 of the solid contenders, 3 of the favorites right now. It's just again unbelievable accomplishment for a guy like that, for Baffert. But he does it more often than not.
And has training changed the way that you look at when you're getting ready to make the odds? There was a time, not all that long ago, but it seems that way maybe to many, when if a horse didn't come in and had a body of work, even that 3-year-old season, had at least maybe like 3-4 races under his belt, you'd kind of wonder, 5 races, that wasn't unheard of. You'd wonder, man, is something happened? Did he have an injury? Did I miss something? And now, obviously, not even comparing Justify last year, unraced it to, but you have horses coming in. They're coming in off 6-week layoffs to the Derby, things that were sort of unheard of until maybe like Barbaro and Big Brown, and some of them started this trend. And Animal Kingdom, who I thought was a turf horse, but obviously won the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I know. I think it has changed. It's changed a lot the way guys train up to the race, and instead of they want to come in with a fresh horse. And that's what it is. And the training up to the Derby is so important now. That's why you look at that last week before the Derby, the last 2 weeks before the Derby, how these horses train at Churchill too, and that's a big plus. That the horse comes in, and you always find a hot horse, and sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't. But especially for making a line, you have to watch who the hot training horse is too for moving. It doesn't matter if ordinarily Justify, people would pitch him, but I mean he came in, he did everything right, and the way he trained up to the race, everybody said, "Oh man, this horse he just coming in great." And you have to look at all that now, but it is different. It is different. You don't have to have 4 races as a 3-year-old before you come into the Kentucky Derby. I mean, you very seldom see the favorite that does anymore.
Talking with Mike Battaglia, known through the sport as an announcer, a race caller, worked at NBC, the oddsmaker for the Kentucky Derby. And I bet every year you still have to explain to people, when you set the odds, that doesn't necessarily mean you think who's going to win the race. It means how you think the betting public is going to make the favorites 1, 2, 3 on down.
Oh yeah, it's not at all who I think will win. Sometimes that's the horse I like, sometimes it isn't. But no, that's not my job. My job is not to pick the winner. It's to give the people a good idea of what odds they're going to get on Derby Day. On this horse at that time. So that's my job. And if I do it right, the odds are going to be very close. And I've had a lot of good derbies, a couple of misses. But it's a tough race to make the line for, because you've got 20 horses. You got you talked about the training going into it. With the Kentucky Derby, honestly, a lot of times too, like if there's a filly in, you get the ladies that bet on the fillies. Not being anything against that. That's fine. They come in, or you get a name that people jump on. And that happens a lot. That I love that name. They start betting on that. So you have to look at all that and try to figure out who they're going to bet on. It's really reading the minds of the bettors. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get in their heads, and that's why I always said I don't think you could make a morning line unless you were a gambler, unless you actually bet on the horses.
You made bets. I know that. I've seen you.
I made a few. I'll be honest with you, Kenny. I don't bet as much as I used to. I just kind of, in my older age, I've done a lot of gambling, but I still bet, but I just don't bet like I used to.
Well, you've always been good, man. I've seen him cash. I know. But now, when you set this line, because people probably wonder at this line. First off, there's a mathematical thing in there, and math is my weak subject, so I always defer to you on this, as you know, a few times. One of the great times is Mike's doing I'm going to tell the story here, okay? Mike is a guest on the show. He's handicapping the Derby for us, and I'm producing the show, which means I'm back timing, and it was a show that was running 46 minutes, roughly a little about that, for a 1-hour show with commercial breaks on TV. And we had just gotten a new computer that would actually allow back timing. And what that means is you just start from the back and go forward to the front of the show, and that would tell you how much each segment would be. We'd already done the segments leading up to the final segment that Mike was on, the big climax. He's going to tell us who he thinks is going to win. And he hit it that year, by the way. That was the year of Unbridled. You picked Unbridled that year. But anyway, so we're adding it on this new computer we have, and we're adding it in our heads, and I say, okay, the first one is 7 minutes, 18 seconds, and then we got 8 minutes and 23 seconds. Before we could finish adding it all up, Mike added it up in his head, and he said, this final segment's going to be, 5 minutes and 15 seconds. And then about 30 seconds later, the computer said it's going to be 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I love that.
Luck.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore.
Well, we were out, we'd taken our shoes off. We're counting on our toes. It was very embarrassing, but you saved us. But when you add up the line, it's got to add up to a number, right? You can't just say, okay, here's a bunch of 50 to 1s. Oh yeah, here's a couple of 8 to 1s, and here's a 5 to 2.
Usually, I use a higher number. I like to stay in the range. My line can be from 122 points to like 128, right anywhere in that. It just depends. And people don't realize that. You do have to use that, but say a horse is 2 to 1 and another horse is 5 to 2. Now that's not a big spread in the line, 2 and 2.5 to 1, but it's 5 points in the line. There's a 5-point difference between a 2 to 1 and a 5-2 shot. So a lot of times when I make a horse 2-1, that would be 33% of your line. But I'm thinking he could go off like a bigger 2-1 to pay 640, 660, 680.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't count all 33. I'll say maybe 30 for that instead of 33.
Mm-hmm.
And so I change a lot of numbers in my mind. So people look at it and say, wait a minute, that doesn't add up. And I say, it does in my mind because this is the way I do it. And it's worked for me all these years. And we'll see. I've been doing the lines for the Derby since 1975. And I think I'm over 90% with the favorites.
Yeah, and is this just a thing that's just happened? Or is it the point system that's helped out with the bettors? I mean, the favorites have been winning the Derby. We have a string of them now, and we went a long time without even one favorite winning.
I know. Yeah, we went from in the 70s, what was it, 79 maybe, until the 90s. It was from 79 until Fusaichi Pegasus, whatever.
Yeah, in 2000. In 2000, it's like two decades the favorite didn't win. There were a couple of close ones, but the favorite didn't win. And now you've got
to the 70s, and the Derby's won, the favorites won 6 times or something. And you go back here recently, it's just been favorite. I don't know. I don't know what can in the point system. You said it. That might be part of it because that did take a horse that would win sprint races as a 2-year-old would get in the Derby because of that, and you could have a phony pace, something like that. But it might have been a small part. But honestly, I think it's just the way it goes, just the way trends happen. I don't sit there and try to figure out why. And does that make it seem like the favorite's got a better chance this year? No, doesn't, not at all. So. I just think it's a trend, and they go back and forth.
The Battaglia family, well known and respected in the thoroughbred racing world. Your father, a legend, and he got young Mike to once upon a time step behind a microphone and call a race, which eventually would lead him to calling Triple Crown races for the network, among other things, including a long-time job at Turfway Park as well. And how did your dad approach you to call that race, Mike?
Yeah, I've told you this story many times.
I love it.
It's the truth. I mean, my dad was, he ran Turfway, he ran Miles Park, River Downs, Charlestown. So he ran a lot of racetracks in his life, and he was kind of one that played it by ear. Well, Chick Anderson was the announcer. He was the announcer of the Kentucky circuit. He did Latonia. He did Miles Park. He did Churchill. There wasn't one at Keeneland, but Chick was the announcer. And, of course, he was just getting to be big time then. And so we were getting ready to run a meet at Miles Park, and my dad was the general manager there, and we're getting ready to start a race meet, and Chick, a couple of weeks before the meet start, got an offer up east. I think it was Rockingham. He said, he and Dad were friends. John, this is way more money, and I'd rather be up there. And Dad says, just go ahead. He said, this is a, quite frankly, it's just a little podunk track, and just go. He said, well, I'll find somebody. So he called me up, and Chick, I said he'd been calling at Turfway too. So he had been calling there at Turfway, but he quit. It was Latonia then. He had quit that a year before. So he was not the announcer there anymore. So I asked the announcer at Latonia if he wanted to go to Miles Park. He called me up, said, can you find an announcer? I was publicity director. So I said, I'll try. And I did. I tried to get an announcer. I asked a couple, nobody wanted to do it. So I said, Dad, nobody wants it. He said, all right, why don't you come and do it? I never even thought about announcing, never called a race, didn't have a pair of binoculars. I mean, I had nothing. And he said, just come down and call it. I said, Dad, I have never. He said, you used to do the radio shows with Chick every day, the last race of the day. I said, yeah. And you watched him call the race? Yeah. Well, then just do what he did. I said, this is. And then he said, listen. I said, Dad, I don't want to do it. He said, listen, this is Miles Park. He said, number one, nobody comes to Miles Park. He said, number two, the sound system is so bad that nobody there can hear you. And number three, no matter how bad you screw up, I'm not going to fire you. And I said, well, when you look at it that way, okay, I'll call. That was in 1972, I believe, maybe 73. And in 78, I called the Derby, affirmed in Alador. It just doesn't even make any sense.
It
It doesn't even make any sense.
I love the fact that, John, your dad told you that he wasn't going to fire you. Bottom line, he wasn't going to fire you. So that should take some pressure.
It took all the pressure. It was just like, he said, just do it. He said, I don't care. And honest to God, I called the first, and Miles Park was a bull ring, too. It was a 5 furlong racetrack. They ran 4.5 furlongs starting from the backs and come home. But they ran 6 furlongs. They had to start a chute that you couldn't even see. That was over on the side of the announcer's booth because they'd come out of this chute, and so you couldn't even they couldn't even start on the oval. And so the first race I called was 4.5 furlongs. There were like 7 horses in there, and you were close up, and it was pretty simple. And he called me up after the race. He said, "Just keep doing that. That's fine." Boom, that was it.
And a handful of years later, 4 or 5 years later, you happen to be calling this Derby one of the more memorable derbies because you had I think still the best rivalry and the Triple Crown, affirmed and Alador. Did you feel any pressure that day, Mike?
I'll tell you, Kenny, you remember me. I was young and stupid. I mean, I was only 28 years old.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is fine. Yeah, I can do this. I'm sure I was nervous, but I don't know. Nerves really have never bothered me. You have to get little butterflies when they play my old Kentucky home. That has to happen. But if you get too nervous, you have to have some nerves. But if you get too nervous, you can't do the job. So. I just assumed I was supposed to be there. I don't know. It honestly didn't make any sense for that quickly that you could be calling the Kentucky Derby, but that's a true story, and that's exactly the way it happened. And in the first, I can tell more stories about how first race I called at Churchill was a fluke too, but everything just fell into place.
Well, you were there for the occasion, though. I think a lot of it, you kind of create your own luck, in my opinion. You have to be in a position to do what you do. I mean, because there are others. But what you do and what the great race callers do, I think, is the toughest thing in sports because everybody thinks you could probably call that one race, and maybe you could. Not the Kentucky Derby, not a big field, but maybe go out and call a third race in the afternoon at Turfway Park if you got a field of 7 or 8. But now you call that next race, you got to say, hey, wait a minute, they got the same color as the horse that finished 4th. Now I got to forget that horse that finished 4th and come back to this. That's what I think is the toughest thing of calling a race.
Yeah, it gets you. I called horse one day. The horse ran one day. It was Frankie Brothers trained him. It was I don't know. Anyway, a horse named Band Power. He ran like on Wednesday, and on Thursday, Frankie ran another one in the same colors. I called him Band Power all the way around. That was the horse that ran the day before.
Frankie must have thought he had something good going, didn't he? Hey, I ran this horse on 18 hours rest.
The horse won. And so they're in the winner's circle before I read, and I looked down and said, "Oh man!" And I said, "The Band Power, a stablemate of so and so, or whoever I was, I can't remember the horse I was called, wins the race." It was, or so and so, a stablemate of, I don't remember the way it was, but anyway, I called the wrong horse. It was either Band Power that was the winner, or Band Power was the horse I was calling wrong. One or the other. I can't remember. It's too long ago. My memory's not that good.
Well, I tell you what I remember. Traveling with Mike Battaglia over the years when we were doing the NBC shows, it's just a blast every time we were out. It was just fun, you know?
We had fun.
And
we had a great crew, and everybody liked each other, and there was no animosity there, and we just had a really good time. And I think that came out on the air.
Yeah, and we told a lot of stories, and some of them were broadcast worthy. Not all.
Yeah.
but there were a few. There were a few that were broadcast worthy.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for being on this show. We want to have you back on, and so right now it's maybe like 3 horses toss up for who you're going to make as the favorite, pending this Arkansas Derby this weekend.
Yep. I'd say 3 or 4. Still maximum security. 3 Baffords and maximum security. Sure,
you can't go wrong with that.
I mean, I know.
Mike, my friend, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you, Kenny.
The wonderful Mike Battaglia, who will be setting the odds for this year's Kentucky Derby, as he always does. And like he says, 90% plus of the time when he says this is a favorite, that's who the public is going to make the favorite. So pay attention. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to this show we call the Horse Racing Show. Simple enough because we bring on experts like Matt Bernier from the Daily Racing Form to make life simple for us and tell us about horse racing and who you should look at, especially with that big race that happens to be coming up the first Saturday in May in Louisville, Kentucky. And Matt joins us now from New England, where it is a little cooler than it is here in Kentucky, where we're doing the show. And Matt, my friend, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Kenny. It's a pleasure. It's always fun. You're one of my favorite people, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you right now. I've said it a number of times. You're one of the nicest people in the entire industry, so it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, you know what? I'm touched. The people behind the scenes here, our producers, they're crying. They're looking. They're not buying any of it, but thank you. You know what?
I mean it.
You know what? And I feel the same about you, and I mean that because you should have fun in this sport. And that's one thing after years and years of covering it that I keep telling people, you know, there's moments to be serious, but by and large, it should be like going to, and I know you know this place well, Fenway Park. It should be something like a great experience where you just enjoy it and you're happy to be there and not feel like I'm at a cathedral. And sometimes, yeah, you know.
That's just it. You know, you have so many of those times where so many people, and I understand, like you say, there are times for serious moments, times to take things, you know, a little bit more to heart. But at the same time, on the flip side, you know, you kind of look at it and you go through all these different places, you go to all these different events, and you got to have fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, what's the point?
Yeah, and you know, and one of the fun things every year is the Kentucky Derby, when people say who's going to win. And I'll bet they've been asking you who's going to win since that first pool came out, when that leaderboard came out in March or in January, which, by the way, Matt, we were talking about it earlier in the show. There's like 4 or 5 horses in the top 21 that are still around from the initial pool, not the pool, but the initial leaderboard that came out. That's how much horse racing can change in a 3-month span. It's it's the Texas Techs of the world that's getting in that you wouldn't expect, you know, like the, you know, By My Standards and horses like that. And I think that's probably one of the things that makes it fun for a handicapper, at least.
Oh, certainly. And on the flip side, it makes it fun, but you do, like you say, you have people asking you from some early months in this entire thing, well, who's going to win? And you can throw out a name in January that, as you made mention, they can either pop up out of nowhere or they can be long gone, totally off the trail entirely. So, you know, you can have a little bit of egg on your face if you give out a name that might not end up living up to expectations. But it is what makes this stretch, this 3-year-old stretch, I think, so much different than the lead up to the Breeders' Cup in November. The Breeders' Cup, we know these horses. They're already established. We know what their strengths, their weaknesses are. With these 3-year-olds, I mean, you know, they're on a week-to-week, day-to-day kind of basis where they can go from one race to the next, look brilliant one time, and the next time out, you throw out a complete clunker, and you're sitting there going, what happened between then and now? So I think that's what that added wrinkle to the 3-year-olds. It just makes it that much more difficult, but at the same time, that much more fun to handicap.
Do you look at a specific thing when you're looking at, and I know there's obviously, you know, first time around, 2 turns, some things like that. Is there kind of a formula that you have, unless you got it in a book that you want to sell and you don't have to tell us anything? But do you have a formula out there that you say, okay, I'm gonna look at this 3-year-old. I'm not, you know, liking him a whole lot, but I'll keep an eye on him because he did something like this in a race.
Yeah, so especially early on with the 2-year-olds and turning 3-year-olds, when they do stretch out to 2 turns for the first time, I always, you know, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword where you see a horse finish really well going a shorter distance. Well, that doesn't always mean that it's going to translate out to 2 turns and going longer distances. But one thing that I'm always very, very anxious to see with those kind of early types is how they gallop out. And I know many people don't believe in it, and many people do believe it. I'm part of that camp that does believe that, you know, if they continue on through the wire and around the first turn, and they really feel like, it looks like they're wanting to go, that the engine's just getting cooking, that's kind of something for me that would suggest, okay, that maybe, you know what, in more time, with more distance, with more seasoning, maybe 2 turns is going to be within their scope. I think another thing that's it seems like it's an obvious thing, but the trainer goes a long way, in my opinion. And certain trainers, if they haven't been there on a stage like this, and it's not meant to be a knock against anyone, but if it's your first time going through, I mean, look, even last year with someone as brilliant as Aiden O'Brien, that
Yes.
was their first run through, and he said we weren't prepared. It was just a totally different ball game. Whereas you have Barnes like Bob Baffert and Todd Pletcher, that this is sure they're still excited and it's new and it's unique with these new horses each time, but they've been there, they've done that, they know how to get a horse ready to go for that. So I think you do always want to be a little bit cognizant of that sort of thing as well.
People ask me this, said, is this going to be a handicapping show when we first started doing this? I said, no, there's good handicapping shows already in existence, like Matt Bernier's show on DRF TV, and I mean that. And so I said, what we'll do is have handicappers on, but I'd like to find out a little bit about the personalities. And I know with Matt, a big score in a national handicapping tournament, work with the DRF. People are tuning in to get your picks on everything. How did young Matt get into horse racing?
I tell you what, it was, when I tell people, they still don't really believe me, but I had no real exposure, no real interest in horse racing all the way up until probably right around 20, 21. And I went home from my school one night. I went to school one town away from where my parents live. So I went back there because I wanted to have good food as opposed to the dining hall food.
Yeah.
And I turned on TVG, and, working for the forum, there's always the politics and whatnot that go into it. But I will always say I turned on TVG because it was on part of our sports package. I thought it was intriguing enough watching the horses run around, and I didn't know how the odds were set. Did a little bit of homework. One thing led to another. I was introduced to tournaments. Won the first tournament I played in, qualified for that contest out in Las Vegas, the National Horse Players Championship. I was the youngest one there at the time. That spun into a reality TV show. The producers called me from Los Angeles and said, we're doing this thing. We'd like you to come along. I thought it was a joke at first. I was half expecting to get to the airport in Hartford, Connecticut, back when I was living out in the western part of the state, saying that, there is no ticket here for you. This is all fake. This is all nonsense. They pulled the wool over your eyes. But it all worked out, and it kicked off what's been a pretty crazy past 5 to 6 years. I'll be coming up on 5 years of the racing form here in about a month. So it doesn't feel like it's been 5 years, but it's been a great ride, and however things play out for the future, anything can happen at any time. Everybody's aware of that. But if nothing else happened from here on out, I would look back and say this has been a hell of a ride.
It's been amazing and well-deserved, by the way. Not just you as a person, but your talent as well for picking horses. Was this something that was almost like, was it a math thing for you that got you into it, that made it click so much? Because I know a lot of guys that studied for years, and if they could just get to one minor tournament, they're happy. And they're pretty good handicappers. You could go out and spend a day with them at Churchill Downs in the middle of the summer, for example, and they'll win a few races. But there's still got to be something about the math or something that made you so good so early to go into major tournaments and beat seasoned veterans out there, I think. Or was it just you're just that good?
No, I'm never going to say that. You know that.
I know. I've said it for you.
I do think it's one of those things for me. I've always related to people that I grew up playing baseball. I love baseball. It's one of my passions. And funny enough that we're talking, it's the home opener for the Red Sox today. I loved baseball since I was very, very young, and I grew up collecting baseball cards. And it's one of those things when people open up the daily racing form, or they open up whatever past performances they're using, if they've never been exposed to them before, it can be very intimidating. You have no idea what you're looking at.
Right.
And for me, it felt very similar to the back of a baseball card with all the statistics just laid out for you. And once you understood what each item meant, it was really not nearly as difficult or as daunting as maybe it looked at face value. So I do think, sure, it's not apples to apples, but I think there was at least a little bit of a, it wasn't so intimidating. It didn't seem so overwhelming to me when I first started looking at it. And I do think there's a little bit of the element of, the gambling piece. Obviously, it's right. A major part of the game, but the idea of looking for value, picking a winner is all well and good, but there are certain instances that it helps you a little bit more picking a winner than others do. And sometimes, I'm going to be fine taking a horse that I think should be 4-1, that's going off at 7 or 8-1, And if they win, great. I think I made the right play. And if they lose, I still think I made the right play. I think that whole sort of game theory and odds and numbers and percentages, I've always been attracted to that sort of stuff too. So I think that helped make it an easier kind of transition and learning curve.
I bet people ask you, you met my cousin Johnny, right? Lives in Oklahoma City. We met at Keeneland.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, he is a pretty good handicapper. I'm trying to get him in some tournaments because I think he is really good. What advice do you give those novice handicappers or those guys that's tried it a couple of times and, you know, sometimes maybe they're a little intimidated, sometimes they're not. Johnny's not. I know that. He'll just dive right in. But is there advice going into a tournament for the first time or second time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many people, particularly new folks, that get involved and they're so afraid of being embarrassed. We're going out there, and if you know what, if you don't connect on anything, if you end up going zeroed out for the entire day or the entire 2 days, whatever kind of format it is. I remember early on when we were taping the reality show, and I joke about it. I say I kind of got a college education from all of the other folks that were there on the show. I learned a little bit from each of them. One of the first things that they instilled in me, particularly Michael Bachok, who won the NHC a few years back, he's based down in Louisiana. He said, people that go for zero, that end up zeroing out, they had as good a chance, if not better, to win than the folks that end up mid-pack for the most part. Because if you go broke, you at least were going for the win. You weren't just trying to slide through and just, there's no real moral victories in a contest. It's a situation where you either win or you lose. And I understand there are different prizes and things like that. But the idea of out of 100 people, if you finished 40th, did you ever really have a chance to win?
Right.
And I think that's the sort of thing where, if you go out there and you end up going broke, if you're playing live money and cash, or even if you have a day where you just don't pick any winners, but you were taking shots on 10, 12 to 1 chances, you know what? Don't feel bad because it happens to everyone. I played in a contest this past weekend at Mohegan Sun, one of the casinos in Connecticut. I drove down with my best friend, and I had an opinion in the race down at Keeneland, the Commonwealth. I liked uncontested. He was just kind of slow getting into stride, and at that point, he was behind the 8 ball, and I zeroed out. But I had my opinion. I took my chance. If he had run well and won, I would have been in good shape. He didn't. You know what? It is what it is. We turn the page, and there's going to be another contest, another opportunity down the road. So just don't let yourself get down if you have a little bit of a dry spell or you end up zeroing out sometimes. You
got to go Richard Dreyfuss and let it ride.
100%. 100%.
The world's greatest movie of horse racing. We've talked about that several times. It's fun. I love that movie. And there's nobody that's ever played in a tournament that doesn't love that movie, is there?
No. I mean, because I think it is, at its core, it kind of feels like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You're going for it. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. And, you can only hope that over time, when you do finally connect one, because it is one of those things. If you have any kind of proficiency, there's going to be a day that you get lucky. The stars are going to line up. It's going to happen. You just hope that when that happens, it makes up for all the losses and then some. And I think that's kind of another analogy going back to just playing the horses in general. You hope that your wins, they're not going to happen nearly as often as your losses are. We all lose technically percentage-wise more than we win, but you hope that the earnings and the revenue that you get back from the wins make up for all those losses.
Have you had a chance to really break this Derby field down just yet? And maybe Roadster jumped in. Well, there's Baffert again. He looks like he's got 3. Maybe if Improbable blows him away this weekend in Arkansas, I don't know. Maybe he jumps up as a favorite. I don't know right now. Who do you like as far as 2 or 3 horses that at least you keep looking at leading up to the Derby, Matt?
Well, like you brought up Roadster. I thought that was a pretty impressive effort there at Santa Anita last weekend. Just the fact that going into the far turn looked like he was actually losing ground, and then he just sort of jumped back into it when Smith wheeled him out into the clear. I think you have to look at him as a legitimate player. Both of the efforts, assuming Improbable does get into the field, just based on the talent that he's shown. Game winner, don't ever question a champion.
Right.
And it's not like he's run poorly in either of his 3-year-old starts thus far. He just got beat by a couple of good horses. Outside of that, I have to be honest. I mean, this has been a little bit of a topsy-turvy 3-year-old group so far, where it's taken a little while. At least we got a little bit of formfulness this past weekend. Tacitus, I have to start looking at him and saying, you know what? The pedigree is there. The connections are there. And I like that he's a little bit battle-hardened. He had some things not go his way early on there in the wood, where they were all playing pinball bumper cars off one another, and he was still able to overcome all that. One other horse that I've always been concerned about distance-wise, and he ran this past weekend down at Keeneland in the Bluegrass. I really was taken by the effort from Win because on the far turn, if he had not gotten stopped the way that he did, maybe he doesn't defeat Vacoma, but it's a heck of a lot closer than 3 lengths or 3.5 lengths. And the way that he finished, all along, I thought maybe he was going to be a one-turn kind of 7/8 closing sprinter. I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. I think there's a chance that this horse actually is going to continue to improve with additional ground. He got his final eighth of a mile just over 12 seconds, about 12 and 2. And just if you want to try to project forward, you got to deal with an extra eighth of a mile for the Derby.
Yeah.
I'm looking for anyone that can get sub 26 seconds for that final quarter. I think Win. Maybe now he's going to be a little bit under the radar, but I'm growing increasingly intrigued by him.
And now the most important question: Red Sox rest of the season.
I mean, it can't be any worse than it started. They're 3-8 going into the home opener.
It's like they didn't know the gate opened. It's like the gate didn't open for them.
The frustrating thing too is you hear Alex Cora, the manager, and it's almost like they think that they're the Patriots and they can just build in, a slow start and it's fine. There's a long way to go. Well, everyone on Sports Talk Radio up here is bringing it up, and I think it is as straightforward as this. The first 11 count the same as the last 11 do, or the middle 11 in August, anytime throughout. So, I mean, a 3-8 stretch is not good at any point in the year. So, hopefully the starting pitching turns it around. I still think they're a good team. I still think they'll win, right around 90, low 90 kind of as far as the total wins are concerned. I don't know if that's enough to run with the Yankees for the division, but it's still a talented team. They just they got to shake the cobwebs out and get ready to go here.
Matt, it's great to catch up with you. I look forward to seeing you in person, and thanks again for taking time to be on our show.
Kenny, always a pleasure. Whenever you want, give me a call.
All right. Matt Bernier from the Daily Racing Forum. You can watch him on DRF TV. Keep up with him as one of the top handicappers out there. You want to know what's going on? Pay attention to him each week. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more right now in a minute on the Horse Racing Show. And welcome back as we wrap up the 12th episode of the Horse Racing Show. We thank you so much for liking and subscribing on YouTube. It means a lot. Listening to us on Google Play and on iTunes, and following us at Horse Racing Show on Twitter. Did I leave out anything, Thomas Kenny?
We're also on Instagram.
Ooh, Instagram. I always forget that. What are we on Instagram? Just go the Horse Racing Show?
I believe so.
Wow. And Facebook. Like us on Facebook. I forgot about that. Which basically is all the family members of the four of us. Of Scott and Ben and Thomas and me. But there's a few others that we don't know, and we appreciate them liking us. It's interesting listening to Matt Bernier talk about how much he just looked at baseball cards and he got into horse racing. And I know you are a big baseball fan and you're really good at math. So I'm getting you ready to take you and enter you in some Vegas horse racing tournaments.
Oh, boy, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
I don't know.
It'll take a little bit of preparation.
I don't know. When we need to add up math, there we count on you. Ben's good at math. Scott's good at math. That's why you all are handling the equipment. I just sit here and talk. Why? I'm not good at math. I know what a 3-to-1 pays. I know what a 5-to-1 pays, but, that's kind of the limit of that. We do know this. If you didn't tune in, we wouldn't be on. So thank you as we continue to count it down to the Kentucky Derby. And next week, we'll all be around to talk more about racing. We'll see how this Arkansas Derby plays out. That should, I think, shake out maybe another favorite to watch on the road to the Run for the Roses. Until then, I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. So long.
Wow.